if you won the lottery, I really hope that never happens to me. I mean, I know for a lot of people, one, I don't play it, so it'd be kind of confusing. But for a lot of people, that would be the dream. A lot of coworkers who just need a punch in the nose and, the ability to go in there and say, oh, I don't need this anymore. But as often as I've thought about it, from time to time, I can't imagine doing anything else. Like, even if I had the ability, right, financially, to never work again in my life, I couldn't deal with that. I can't sit at home and do nothing. I've got to be doing stuff, and to be honest with you, I'd rather be doing nothing else in the whole world than what I'm doing right now. So I hope I never win it, and just don't have to deal with the hassle of handling all that money and discovering all those new cousins you never knew. We're continuing our series in 1 Thessalonians, and we're in chapter 4. We have just a little bit to go. We've got about a chapter and a half more, and we'll be done with the whole book here. Starting in verse 9. And last week, we talked about how God's will for the people was their purity and how they should keep away from sexual immorality and pursue God. And it kind of turns to a different kind of love here. Now, concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. For that indeed is what you're doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia. But we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more. An important part of life in the early church was the way that they would support each other. Famines in the ancient world were common, and so churches would take up collections, and in one church they'd hear about a need in another church, and they'd send them money, and that's what this church was doing. Out of their relationship with God flowed a natural desire to help other people. Christine and I had a very serious talk the other day. She just asked me, Dad, what can I do to help the poor? So we sat down and had a conversation about that. When you follow God, you want to be doing the work that He's doing. It goes on in verse 11. So that you help others, and you do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. Here he hints at an issue that became a big problem for this church. There were some people that were involved there that were constantly stirring things up and running from house to house and spreading gossip, and they quit their jobs. And it is to these people that he's addressing now. He says, live quietly. Now, to those of you with small children, you might not think this is possible. But he says, live quietly and mind your own affairs. There are some people whose lives are defined by a peace in their relationships. On any given day, you talk to them, and for the most part, their relationships with other people are tranquil and calm. Other people are surrounded by drama. There's a constant noise and uproar in their life. And on any given day, when you talk to them, there is always something going on. And this person said that to that person, so now I'm not talking to them. And then they're upset at this other person. Sometimes they don't see it that way. You talk to them and they say, I don't understand why there just so happens to be all of these backstabbing, evil people in my family and all my friends in every place I've ever worked. I can't see the common factor here. It's like Typhoid Mary being confused why all these people around her keep getting sick. Have you ever considered, if that is what your life looks like, that the source of all of this tension and difficulty in these relationships might be you? Especially so if you're not living quietly and minding your own affairs. Here is a proverb that will save you so much heartache in life. Whoever meddles in a quarrel not his own is like one who takes a passing dog by the ears. Next time you see a stray dog, right, a nasty-looking one without a collar, pats his fur, just go up to it and wrench its ears and see what happens. imagine somebody who makes a habit of doing this in their life coming to you being like, man, I don't know what his dogs don't like me. I keep getting bit by dogs. I don't understand why. Stop grabbing them by the ears. You don't need to do that. I tell people about, my old boss Mike. He got attacked by a bear one time. And they're like, oh, that's horrible. I'm like, yeah, he was bear hunting. And they're like, well, what do you expect? When we constantly put ourselves into situations that got nothing to do with us, amplifies the problem. Here's what happens all the time. You have two people, they have an issue with each other. And then somebody else, they get involved. And now people begin to take sides, and more people are drawn into a conflict. And before you know it, the whole town's talking about it. And then people are taking sides, and now other people who initially had nothing to do with this situation are mad at each other because of something that should have stayed between two people. Instead, if you have a problem with someone, Jesus says, go to that person, just the two of you, and work things out. Nearly every situation in life, things can be resolved between two people, nobody else gets involved, and none of that happens. And if it's not your fight, stay out of it. I know it's tempting. We have this natural human interest in the drama in other people's lives. That's why that's like an entire category of TV show and movie. But look, if you hear your neighbors having a marital dispute, don't hop the fence and start taking sides. Like, yeah, I can hear you snoring from my house. You're not going to solve anything like that. It will cause needless strife. And sometimes people will try and involve you. Like, you're not looking to get involved. It's like a dog just comes out of nowhere and attacks. Wisdom is saying in those situations, this has nothing to do with me. You need to go and talk to that person yourself. For many people, living quietly and minding your own affairs may mean deleting several apps from your phone. He says, work with your hands. This is the root cause of those other problems. And it's interesting to see them paired, because I've taught on gossip before and I've taught on work before, but never in the way that he connects them here. He says, the reason they had all of this time to go around stirring up all of this stuff is that they were sitting at home and not working. We were made to work. It was part of God's intention for us. Work was present in the Garden of Eden before sin came. God could have created a garden intended for itself, but he created the garden, then he created Adam, who worked the garden. Work will be present in heaven. Part of the rewards that Jesus describes for people who serve him faithfully is greater responsibility there. And before that stresses you out, just consider what your job now would look like if everybody there lived in sinless perfection. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. You never had to call tech support and nothing ever broke. We were made to work. So laziness is a rejection of God's intention for us, and it is sinful. Proverbs 18:9. Whoever is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys. And I was teaching the youth, and I read this verse and said, this is a sinful pattern of behavior. And one of the kids goes, oh God! He realized it was on life heading into the summer, what he was doing. But for this church that Paul writes to, Thessalonica, they weren't not working because they were on summer break. Some people had convinced them that Jesus was about to return at any moment, like, guys, he's probably coming back this week or something. And so they thought, well, man, if he's coming back tomorrow, why go to work today? I mean, what would you do if you were like absolutely convinced that Jesus was coming back on a Tuesday? Would you go to work on a Monday? Continue life as normal? And that's what these people did. So he says, work with your hands. We instructed you, and then these two things, he says, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. Walk properly before outsiders. He gives consideration to how this appears to people outside the church. When they look in and they see us, what do they see? Let me ask you, why do people highly regard the Amish? Personally, I'm jealous of their ability to grow beards, that being something I've never been able to do. They're incredibly hardworking, industrious people. We kind of assume, right, if you buy something, Amish blank, whatever it is, it's going to be good. Amish jam, or Amish bread, or Amish furniture. If I went into an Amish gas station and they had sushi in the fridge there, I'd trust it. This should be the view that people have of Christians in general. People should have the attitude of, man, if I hire somebody and he shows up with like a Christian bumper sticker, oh man, I'm excited because I know I've got a gold mine there. That's somebody who's going to show up for work on time, who's going to do the work well, even when nobody is looking. Somebody who's going to work without complaint and is not going to stir up trouble in the office. We should be walking properly before outsiders. And then he says, be dependent on no one. Now, this time, in the Roman world, there was essentially no government assistance at all for the poor. And so if these people had stopped working, the people they were dependent on were other people in the church. You know, Timmy just shows up at your house like, hey man, I didn't go to work today. Can you give me like lunch? Jesus probably comes back. If it is possible for you to work and to earn your own living, you should be doing that. People who abuse the system that now exists to help people in need will be judged by God. But there are two people that he's not speaking about here. He says, be dependent on one. And one is people who are genuinely disabled and unable to work. My stepbrother is a nonverbal autistic. There is no expectation before God that he is going to get a job at Walmart or something like that. And so the programs and the systems that exist that make life possible and better for him are a good indication of the kind of people we are as a nation. There is no shame in receiving assistance from government programs or church benevolence if you're otherwise unable to provide for yourself. Because the people that he's talking to and says, stop being dependent on others, they did that because of a choice. They chose to stop working. And as we'll see in a moment here, part of church life is caring for others in need. We should also, I believe, expect our government to do some of that same work. The second group he is not addressing is stay-at-home moms. He says you should work with your hands. It boggles my mind the amount of work that goes into the caring and rearing of children. And I never cease to be amazed now when I come home, get dressed in the morning, I open the drawer, and my boxers are folded neatly in rows. That has never before happened in our marriage. Now, they didn't have, at that time, a term for stay-at-home moms because that was everybody. It was very rare for women to earn a living outside of the home. And this also put widows in severe need. If your husband died, you would either be dependent on begging for food or, in many cases, prostitution. And so an important ministry in the early church was when a woman's husband died would be to care for her, provide for her. Paul writes to Timothy about this. And it's interesting, you'll see kind of the same theme here. This is in 1 Timothy chapter 5. And so he's writing about their way of caring for widows. And he says, it is a good thing to do, but don't do this for any widow under the age of 60. Here's one of the things that was happening. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander. Here again, we see something that happens when someone is able to work and chooses not to. There is a corruption that happens there. And the answer, again, to this gossip and stirring up trouble is to work. And here he defines that work as get married, have kids, take care of your house. That is absolutely work worth doing. But I'll also say, if you have kids and you want to pursue a career, do it for the glory of God. Work with your hands. If you want to stay home and clean up spilled Cheerios and sticky everything for the next 18 years, do it to the glory of God. Are you a teenager and out of school for the summer? Find a way to work with your hands for the glory of God. Get a taste of adult life. It will do you well. Are you retired? Do not waste these years of your life. You have time that other people don't. You have this resource that's been given to you. And I tell you for your own good that watching reruns of MASH will never satisfy you in the way that meaningful involvement in other people's lives will. Find a way to be productive, to serve God. It's what you were made to do. God's desire to use you does not stop at retirement. How old was Moses when God used him to deliver the people from Egypt? But what if you're already working? You say, okay, well, I've got a job. I am actively involved in whatever my capacity right now in life. How should the church deal with a situation like Paul describes? We find more detail in the second letter that Paul writes to the same church in Thessalonica. I'll let you guess the name. 2 Thessalonians. Chapter 3, verse 6. He writes about the same situation that had developed farther. Now we command you, brothers, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you keep away from any brother who is walking in idleness and not in accord with the tradition that you received from us. There is a difference between those who claim to be followers of Jesus and those who do not, and the way that we interact with them. Let me tell you, I want to be around alcoholics. I am called to preach the gospel, and part of that is being around people who do not know God. And I can't do that if I never interact with people who are living sinful lives. That is our mission, that we're called to go into a world that needs Jesus. But if somebody claims to be a follower of Jesus and is walking in sin, no matter what that may be, that is a different story altogether. That is a corruption and a perversion of the gospel. And so here he says, keep away from them. Have nothing to do with them. In the next paragraph, he says the same thing, not just avoiding those who are lazy, but anybody disobeying the commands they've given them. Verse 50, if anyone does not obey what we say in this letter, take note of that person and have nothing to do with him, that he may be ashamed. And now, hear your heart in this. Do not regard him as an enemy, but warn him as a brother. So our response to, and again, this is so important in the life of the church, that we care about the spiritual growth of others. So sometimes it means lovingly withdrawing from people. To encourage them to get their lives in order, not because we hate them, or out of anger, or condemnation, or a judgmental attitude, but in love, because God calls us to more. And we want to see them change. Back in verse 7 it says, for you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, because we were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But with toil and labor, we worked night and day that we might not be a burden to any of you. It was not because we do not have that right, but to give you in ourselves an example to imitate. So here again, Paul says, look, when I was with you guys, I could have asked for you to pay me as a preacher of the Word of God, but I chose not to. Because it was so valuable for you to see me work, and he made tents while he was with them. He worked night and day to teach them, to do that and buy his own food, make his own way, so that when he writes to them again, he says, look, you saw how I worked with you. That's your example to follow. So we're called to set a good example ourselves. So that if we go to someone else and say, look, you are living in laziness, they can't point to our lives and say, you're doing the same. Verse 10. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Love the play on words. Now this verse is tricky to deal with, especially when people get in arguments online. Because many people, they read this and their first thought is, okay, how does this apply to the government? There's a few caution marks before we begin to do that. This is talking about a situation in the church, not the government. People who quit work, they were dependent on others in the church to feed them. He says, stop giving that dude lunch. Tell him to go get a job. We are not given anywhere in the New Testament a system of law that we're supposed to implement in our government. So sometimes it's very difficult to say how something that applies to the church might apply to our laws. And it's also difficult because nowadays many people have these polarized views on the issue of the way we help people who are in need. There are some people who seem to say, hey, we should help everybody with everything all of the time, no questions asked. And then there are other people who say, well, if any of the money that I pay in taxes is used to help anybody in any situation of need, that is theft. What should we do? We look at these verses, I would say, especially, you look at 1 Timothy and what the church did with widows, there is a legitimate place for programs to help people in need. Things like Medicare and Medicaid and food stamps, they meet a legitimate need. Let me give you an example. In ancient Rome, it was common practice for couples, if they did not want more children, when a child was born, they would abandon it to die to the elements. Massively widespread. This practice was ended when, at the urging of the church, Constantine passed a law not outlawing the practice, but providing assistance to families in need. So it became less of a decision, if we have another kid, are we going to starve? And this was one of the major things that ended the practice. So there's a legitimate place for doing things like that. And yet, when we look at this, there must be a sense of accountability in the whole process. There should both be an encouragement for those who are able to work to do so, and a rejection of those who work the system. Exactly what this looks like and how it's implemented, this verse isn't clear on. Where the Bible isn't clear, that's when I need to stop talking. Where it is clear, and where we can directly apply these verses, is how we deal with helping people within the church. There will be people who go into a church, and part of their goal is to get something out of it. I'll say of my own mom. We sat down with her, we were trying to have an intervention, and discovered she was like $14,000 in debt. And as part of all these conversations, we were pleading with her to make some changes, and she said, well, I'll just go to the church and it'll help me. I'm like, I don't know what you think the church does, but man, I don't think they have $14,000 sitting in a bank account waiting for you to show up and claim it. It's not what they're there to do. There will be people who come in and they work their way into church circles and they know that Christians are loving people and they want to help people in need. But there are those who wear a false disguise or they're manipulative in their requests. I believe this congregation was taken for quite a bit of money by a traveling family that came through, gave you a sob story, and you collected a love offering on the spot. And then they went and did that with another church and another church and another church. So when you help people, be wary. If someone comes to you and asks you for money or assistance, and you're not very familiar with that person's life, you have a few options. You can tell somebody no, or if you're just unsure, throw me under the bus. Send them to me. I manage not only a benevolence fund that the church has set aside for members who are in need, but also with the ministerial life for those outside of the church. And again, he says, if anyone's not willing to work, don't help them. And so there are times when I interact with people who express an unwillingness to do the things that they need to do in their life. And so there are times where I take calls in the ministerial alliance. Somebody's power is about to be cut off. They're about to be evicted. And the most loving thing I can do for that person in that moment is to say no. You need to work. Because there are people who carry this expectation. And their names to me, because I'm the person that right now all these calls are getting funneled to, they're names that are very familiar to me now after 2.5 years in this community. Like, they say who they are, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm familiar with their story. Verse 12. He talks about these people, and he says, now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. Now again, it's so important that even as we are wise in discerning the way that we help people, that we don't miss the underlying motivation behind it all. And it is not that we become penny pinchers in the church, unwilling to do the slightest thing for anyone or make excessive demands of people or guilt and shame people who come to us for help. So he says, in this case, even with people he knows are being lazy and idle when they shouldn't be, he's firm. He says, we command them, but there's also this note of encouragement. We want you to be doing better. Sarah and I, at one point, had a friend of hers move in with us. It was a situation of real need. She discovered her mom was selling cocaine out of the apartment that she was staying in. She had a 4-year-old girl with her. And though we were barely above the poverty line ourselves, we overnight picked her and her daughter up, moved them into our one-bedroom apartment because we felt that's what God wanted us to do. Now, she was in a really rough spot in life, and we were able to get into a slightly larger apartment, but she was able to get a job at Walmart, and she didn't have a driver's license. And so what that meant for us in our daily routine was that Sarah would drive her when she went to work. She would take her, and she would drive her to work, and when I got off of work, I would go and pick her up. Was this convenient? No. It was a pain in the butt. I really did not, and it would have been way more convenient for us not to do it. And yet, for her own good, for her dignity as a person, we were willing to. And today she is happily married and back on her feet. I love when I see church members willing to do those kinds of things. I know several of you that have taken people and you've gone out of your way to help them find employment. And that is what the church is incredible at. You do understand, there is no government program that exists that can drive your neighbor to work. I don't know of any. There are situations that the church people are able to step into and encourage people and help them along the way. And I've seen it happen where people go from like being homeless or continually just not making it, and because people love them and are willing to invest in them and have high expectations of them, God lifts them out of that. I want you to be a part of that in other people's lives. That's God's desire through the church. And let me tell you, if the church in America does this effectively, we will do far more to end poverty than any law that could be passed. Let's pray. God, I pray that you would remind us that no matter our stage in life, no matter our current situation, our physical health, our age, that you have created us for good works. Whether that be raising children, being involved in the lives of others, or our career. God, I pray that you would help us with wisdom and firmness and gentleness and love and encouragement to recognize people who are in need, the ways that we can meet them in their position of need, and to do your work. God, we understand in all of this that we ourselves are dependent on your grace, that you give us your love and your forgiveness that we don't deserve and cannot work for. Give us humility. But God, I pray that through the church we would see generational poverty around us eased. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Staying with us.
History that should us as he cries out to thee, oh how desperately he wants us. Things on earth stand next to him, like a candle to the sun.